Okay, guys, so today we're going to discuss some important things about Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is about network and computer attacks, and we have two main things to discuss in Chapter 3. Firstly, we'll talk about the definition of malware and we'll discuss different types of malware. We will also discuss how we can get rid of those. Then we will discuss some network security attacks, some basic terminologies and definition that you need to know about. I believe some of you guys might already heard of those particular attacks that we're going to talk about. So please do let me know if you guys need any help, any assistance. We can discuss that in online session. So first of all, the word malware, it's the short form for malicious software, where mal is taken from malicious and ware is taken from software. So the short form of malicious software is malware. So that's basically the short form for malicious software. And if you want to define what is basically a malware, so malware is any software or a program that is designed to damage IT assets and used for unauthorized access to systems. So for example, if we specifically deliberately design a software to get unauthorized access to a system, that is basically a malicious software. To damage IT assets, that's again the malicious software. So in simple word, you can say any software which is designed to destroy, damage, to gain or to take control of assets. That's basically what the malicious software is. Malware can be further classified, or you can say there are three main types of malware. One is viruses, second worms, and the third one is Trojans. So these are mainly the three types of malware, but most of you guys heard about viruses. We'll talk about the definition and the differences between viruses, worms, and Trojans. Another very important thing to note down about malware, previously malwares were operating system specific, but nowadays malware they are like the cross-platform supported. So nowadays malware are cross operating systems supported, not specific to one particular operating system. So for example, no matter if that operating system is going to be Mac or Linux, so there are some malware which can be designed using cross-platform as well. So let's talk about virus first. Virus is basically it's small piece of destructive code which attaches itself to a file, a program file. So just like any other software, virus is also something like a small piece of code, and it actually attaches itself with a program file. Okay, and whenever you open that file, it can trigger itself. So it cannot replicate itself. That's the limitation. Cannot replicate itself. Plus, it cannot trigger itself. Even though if you have a virus arrived into your computer, it cannot replicate, it cannot trigger itself. It requires a human intervention in order to get it triggered, or you can say for replication as well. Many examples of the viruses, how virus can be attached. One of the common type of virus propagation is phishing. Okay, and phishing, it's basically tricking the people over email. That's the typical definition. But how a virus can be propagated on phishing? It can be attached with email, and once anyone open the attachment, it gets triggered. Okay, so that's basically one of the way of propagation of virus. Another type of virus is ransomware attack, where you might heard about. Ransomware is basically where you can say it actually locked the computer and then asked the user to for the ransomware for the ransom or extortion money in order to give the password back. That's ransomware. So the definition of ransomware is it is used to lock a user's system and until lock the user system until the system owners pays a ransom, or you can say extortion money, in fact. So that's basically what ransomware is. One of the commonly used ransomware attack, because ransomware attack, it had been used for long. It is very easy to execute as well. One of the ransomware software is called Cryptolocker. Cryptolocker. Please don't download it. You can Google it, of course. You will find plenty of Cryptolockers, but please don't install on your personal computer, because you never know, you could be a victim of ransomware as well. Okay, because it's only on the dark web. How we can actually get rid of these viruses, and for example, if a virus hits your computer, how we can detect that, how we can avoid it. And the best solution is, I believe everybody knows that, it's antiviruses. Antiviruses, they operate on two ways, and most of the antiviruses, they actually work on signatures, and that signature is basically a hash code. So it's the antiviruses, they detect the viruses using their signatures. So what I'm trying to say is, basically, let's say this is an antivirus. You have, for example, Avast or Kaspersky, for example. It has all the signature of the viruses, like it knows how a ransomware looks like, how phishing, etc., etc. It knows all the signature of the viruses, like hash code of the viruses, and then it scans all the files present in your computer. So what happens actually? It keeps scanning all the files in your computer whenever and calculate a hash value of all files. If a hash of the file being scanned matches with any of the entry, then virus has been detected. So that's the way how most of the antiviruses, they work. So they detect the viruses using signatures and can mitigate some risks associated with those particular malware. And this signature, please remember that signature is a hash code. I believe most of you guys know what is the hash code. Is exactly MD5 and all those hash codes. Pattern that antivirus uses to compare known viruses to each file on computer. Okay. The next is the macrovirus. Macroviruses are becoming very common nowadays. Like these macroviruses are usually written in macro language like Visual Basics, and they can be implanted or integrated within your Microsoft Word file, Excel sheets, and all that. So macroviruses written using macro language, and if you want to further define it, it's basically a type of virus which is written as a list of commands that can be set automatically to run as soon as a computer user opens up the file. So what is basically that? As I mentioned, macrovirus, it's basically like it can be written in Visual Basics and it can be integrated in, let's say, a Word file or Excel sheet. And what happens, in fact, I mean, we actually add them in the as a, I forgot exactly, but I will let you know with that. So basically, it actually integrated within the Microsoft Word file. When anybody opens that particular file, it automates the destructive actions. Okay, and then it gets triggered. Then the worms. Worms is another type of malware, and that's basically it can replicate. That's the main difference. So worms are basically the self-contained programs that replicate themselves without human intervention. Without human intervention. So when any worm, when a worm strikes your or hits your network or a computer, it doesn't require any human intervention like opening a file, closing a file in order to get it triggered. And then it can automatically propagate itself. The examples of worms are Stuxnet, CodeRed, and Configure. So these are some of the example, and this Configure is basically which targeted Microsoft Windows, and it has especially the Microsoft Windows 7. It targeted Microsoft Windows 7 as well, and it can affect any operating system as well. It's not basically just the Microsoft Windows. And usually worms are designed to take control of a network to turn a computer into a zombie computer, so attacker can actually use that computer as a platform and launch attacks. Then the Trojans. Trojans are basically, they pretend themselves as something useful but having some hostile intentions. So Trojan is a malware that presents themselves as useful computer program, but having hostile intentions. Then what it can do, it can open backdoors by installing specific types of programs to allow an attacker access to the computer. Like what it can do is it can turn off your firewall, it can actually turn off your antiviruses to let the bad traffic in. It can open ports in your computer and stuff like that. So it can open ports in your computer whenever attackers, they actually scan a computer using Nmap scan, find the open ports, and then it can get into that computer by using those open ports. Another very important thing to know about Trojan is like Trojans can actually they can arrive in your computer by visiting a malicious website. For example, if you just visit a malicious website, it can actually arrive in your computer. Then the spyware, as name suggests, spy software. So in order to spy, or you can say monitor remote computer activities. So like you might heard about keyloggers and some other those kind of computers, those kind of software are basically spyware. And what happens actually, these spyware install themselves on victim's computer, and then send information to attacker. So it's kind of like they install themselves and became the agent of hacker, and then that particular agent start communicating with the attacker. Next is the advertisement software, adware. Adware is very similar to spyware, but it doesn't have any kind of destructive intentions. So adware as name suggests, advertisement software, similar to spyware, but does not have any destructive intentions. Okay, what it does, they collects your web browser history for advertisements. Like, they collect your information and send that information to advertisement companies. Advertisement adware are basically, it's something like a pop-up message, or it display a banner maybe that notifies the users of its presence. You might have seen the a pop-up message at the bottom, something like that. For example, free college admission, something like that. Sometimes these adware, once you open any one link, it opens many multiple applications on its own. So that's basically how the adware looks like. Then protecting against malware, how we can avoid malware. One thing should be very clear, like these 0-day malware or the viruses are impossible to avoid. So you cannot avoid these 0-day attacks. 0-day attack mean any attack which has not been reported before. Like, it's kind of a new attack which doesn't exist before. So why we call it 0-day? Because the security administrators, they got 0-day to avoid against that particular patch. Best is, of course, always keep your antiviruses up to date, updated. So whenever you update antivirus, it actually adds new virus or malware signatures. And educating user is also the best way to avoid viruses. Like, you can train the user like which particular files you can use or which website you can visit and all that. Then there are a few terms that are very important from exam point of view. Please remember these terms. Like, one of the term is called attack. What is attack? What is exploit? So attack is basically, you can say it's any attempt by an unauthorized person to access, damage, or use network resources. That's called attack. While exploit is basically a loophole, or you can say it's a pitfall through which attack can be executed, can be realized or executed. One of the type of malware which I missed in the previous step, it's called rootkits. Rootkits are they actually hide themselves within operating system files. And please remember one thing: whenever you boot your computer, it gets triggered because it resides within the operating system file. Please remember one thing about rootkits: if there is a rootkit in your computer, it is impossible, 99% it is impossible to get rid of rootkits. Okay, that's the problem of rootkit. Then I believe most of you guys already heard about DOS attack, denial of service attack. What exactly it does? DOS attack is basically crippling, or it cripples the network and prevents legitimate users from accessing network resources. This is called DOS attack. Like for example, this is a website. Our website is running on this server. This server can handle 5,000 queries per second. So for example, there is an attacker. If he start pushing 10,000 queries per second, what's going to happen? It will freeze. It will cause freezing of our server. Website can be down and stuff like that. That's the problem. One of the possibility, or you can say one of the way to execute DOS attack is ping of death. And ping of death is if you increase the number of ping packets or increase the packet size. So that's called ping of death. So ping of death is basically it causes the victim's computer to crash or freeze. So when the attacker creates and delivers a large ICMP Internet Messaging Control Protocol packet of 65,000 almost bytes. So basically attacker, what they do is they actually prepare a packet of 66,000 byte and send that ping packet to the victim's computer, and it gets overwhelmed. DDoS attack is, for example, if DOS attack is basically launched from multiple nodes. That is called DDoS attack, distribution denial of service attack. And DDoS attack is, in order to launch DDoS attack, attackers usually use botnets. I'll explain you botnet in a while. Botnet is basically the network of zombies. So botnet is basically a network of computer which is in control, or which is controlled by hacker. You might have heard about this word zombie computers. Zombies are basically a computer controlled by hacker. So hackers, what they do is they actually, and the network of zombies are called botnet. Networks of zombies are called botnet. So botnet is basically where hackers, what they do is they find a computer having weak security, and then they actually send their agent and take control of that particular computer and turn that computer into a zombie computer. You might have seen or might have noticed a pop-up message when you try to shut down your computer. You might have seen it might say you, if you log out your computer, some other persons or people who are using this computer might lost their work and stuff like that. That's basically one of the symptoms that your computer could be a zombie computer. Then we have a buffer overflow tag. Buffer overflow tag is basically a vulnerability of a software where attacker, they actually a software which if it doesn't actually check the memory requirement, then attackers they can actually play with that memory, and they actually increase the size of the packets which memory might have to store. So buffer overflow attack is basically where attacker finds vulnerability in the source code of a program. Okay, and what that vulnerability is, that does not check for the memory space requirement for a packet. And then attacker, what they do is they actually write a code and overflow that packet. Attacker writes a virus or a code that overflows the buffer resources. Okay. Then man in the middle attack. Man in the middle attack is where attacker actually, let's say these are two, for example, this is sender one, this is, let's say, receiver, for example. Attacker actually implant itself within these people. That is man in the middle attack. So in the man-in-the-middle attack, whatever this sender sends to this receiver, it goes through from this particular attacker. So attacker injects themselves between two legitimate parties, okay, and then manipulate the messages. For example, sender is sending hi, hello, and when it goes through from a man-in-the-middle eavesdropper, it can actually make it, let's say, hell, something like that. That's man-in-the-middle attack. Session hijacking attack, we'll discuss session hijacking attack in our chapter number 9 in detail, but just the small definition is, again, it's a part of man-in-the-middle attack where attacker joins TCP session and makes both parties think that he or she is the other legitimate party. What does it mean? So basically, let's say, let me just give you a basic idea. For example, this is a user wants to access this particular website, let's say hotmail.com. Okay, so you basically send some TCP packet to hotmail.com. So attacker, what they will do, they will inject themselves right in the middle, steal your session token, and then pretend that they are basically hotmail.com. So you basically, and they actually make you believe that this is hotmail.com, and then try to steal all your confidential data. That is called session hijacking attack. In order to execute that, attacker has to steal session token. Okay, that's basically what we'll discuss in upcoming chapter. So if you guys have any question, please send me email, or we can have one-on-one session as well.